understanding of how outages are occurring and how to best respond to air quality issues, and just generally increase our understanding of emerging issues we should be aware of as we move through fire season this year. We have several great speakers for you who will share from their respective agencies today, including CAL FIRE, PG&E, Napa County Office of Emergency Services and Public Health, Napa Sheriff's Office, and the Napa County Office. So grateful for your presence today. A few housekeeping items. Any resources shared as we go will be sent out to you following the event. And we'll have a Q&A period at the end of the presentations. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started with our panel. And kicking us off is Eric Hernandez with CAL FIRE. Eric is a fire inspector with Napa County Fire. He's been in that role for 3 years, and he oversees the Defensible Space Program, and he also serves as the information officer for CAL FIRE for our area. And good little reminder just to keep yourselves on mute until you have a question. So with that, I'll turn it over to Eric.
Thank you so much, Julie, and thank you to the Office of Education for giving us an opportunity to present and to highlight some of the efforts that we've been working on over the last couple of years in preparation, especially this year in preparation for fire season. As we all are very familiar with, is no longer, 6 months out of the year. Fire season has unfortunately become year-round. And so, just wanted to touch on that. One of the things before I get started, I also wanted to explain the cooperation between CAL FIRE and Sonoma Lake Napa unit and Napa County Fire. Our CAL FIRE unit, which consists of six counties, has contracted with Napa County. Napa County has contracted with the unit to provide services for prevention and suppression efforts, including a fire marshal's office. And so one of the things that we do in our fire marshal's office is inspect construction, building construction, such as residential, industrial, and commercial. And when we talk about preparation, the way that we like to break it down is we look at defensible space, which is basically the meat and potatoes, right? When we look at the defensible space and why that's important, and also how does that play a role during wildland fires. And so one of the things that we've added to our program is a defensible space inspection program where we go out in the community and we provide assessments and we issue notices to property owners that are not consistent with our defensible space program and our ordinance. And the reason for that, obviously, is when we talk about fire, wildland fires, we have to take in consideration three things. Wildfires are driven by three components. One is topography. Topography being the hills, the beautiful hills and the mountains that we're known for, and there's nothing that we can do about our topography. The second is the Mother Nature. So obviously, we historically know that in Napa County, we expect high winds in September and October months, and sometimes in November as well, and which is typically the driest time of the year for our vegetation. And again, that's not something that we have control over. And then the third component is our fuel load. That's the one component that we do have a say in, where we get to do something about, and that's where we come in with performing defensible space inspections. Just as random numbers this morning, and just this year, we're a little bit over 1,900 inspections, which our goal is to do as many inspections as we can. We've also added a consulting program where property owners that have met defensible space requirements, that have the willing and the ability to perform additional work, but they don't know how to properly do it, such as shaded field breaks, they can contact us and one of our members will go out and do an assessment of the property and provide an education approach so that we can reduce the fuel load in addition to the defensible space. We also look at infrastructure, such as fire hydrants. Do you have the proper connections? And also we meet with owners, property owners and residents to put together an evacuation plan. When we talk about fires, we generally think wildland fires, but one of the things that we learn is we're forgetting about structure fires. So what can we do to ensure that we don't have a structure fire? And vice versa, to make sure that a structure fire doesn't become a wildland fire. And so we're constantly educating our community members on smoke alarms. Napa City, we give credit to, they have a good smoke alarm program that they offer to the city of Napa residents. And so we urge, if you live in that, if you have parents that live in that area, it's good to take advantage of that free program. And then also we inspect schools. So schools are state mandated inspections, private and public. So that means that every year a fire inspector from the local jurisdiction has to come out and perform a annual inspection to ensure that the school is conforming with California fire codes and NFPA standards. And on that, we look at fire drills. And when we talk about fire drills, there's obviously several different types of drills: fire drills, earthquake drills, and someone correct me if I'm wrong. I know it's an active, emergency lockdown drill, I believe. I might have the terminology wrong, but one of the things that we ensure is those type of drills are taking place and actually being documented. And we also urge our teachers to provide information to our students. And we take that as a platform for us to talk to the students and talk about the importance of fire drills, not just in schools, but also in their homes. We're always thinking about fires, but one of the things that we constantly forget is earthquakes. We're in California. Earthquakes can happen at any time. And that's one of the things that we try to prepare our community for. And so, when we're talking about preparation, it's important also to note is some of these schools are in vulnerable areas where there's limited access, but at the same time, there's limited phone reception. And so one of the things that we encourage or we bring up during our inspections is what happens if there's an immediate need to evacuate? What's your plan? What's your plan of action to get all the kids out of the school so that we can safely get them to a safe location? Because even though we practice fire drills are meant for structure fires, right? And we meet at a certain location away from the structure. But what happens during a wildland fire, right? We have to start thinking about that, looking at the campfire in Paradise. That's one of the things that we're learning is we need to have not just the basics, but we need to think outside of the box. And I want to offer, we're here to find those solutions for you. And as teachers and principals, if you have any questions, reach out to your local fire department. And that's something that we're definitely looking at that up. And then, in cooperation with our county OES and our sheriff's office, we continue being out in the community and available for events. But I'll provide a link on the bottom so that if anybody wants to have more information about our Defensible Space program and also preparation program, you could follow our social media and also our website. And that's pretty much what I have.
Great. Thank you, Eric, for sharing that information. So next on our panel is Brianna Jones. Brianna Jones is the Emergency Service Officer with the County of Napa, the Office of Emergency Services, and OES operates and supports the overall county response to the disasters. The Emergency Operations Center in the event of a disaster and supports emergency preparedness. So Brianna, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Julie. As Julie mentioned, my name is Brianna Jones, and I'm an Emergency Services Officer with Napa County Office of Emergency Services, OES. So a few things I want to talk about today is how to be informed before emergencies. So NICSLs are what we use in the county. Their text alerts also may come by email. One of the things that we're promoting is the Everbridge app. The app sends push notifications, and to get the app, you just you can download it in the App Store, or you can send a message to 888-777, who's where the NICSLs come from, and you can say app, and it will give you a link to download the app. Why we think the app is important is a lot of people through some of the other fires and COVID, there's something that came up with NICSL fatigue, and the app just sends push notifications so you can monitor your settings there. Another thing that the app is really good for is if you don't have, yes, I can provide a link for that. But if you don't have cell service and you do have internet or Wi-Fi at your house, which I know a lot of the people that you service live in rural areas, they can still utilize it if they have Wi-Fi. So the app will still send push notifications. It's how we communicate during disasters or communicate anything. Obviously, we don't do it alone. The Sheriff's Office supports this effort. Next, we like to talk about wireless emergency alerts. These are alerts that you don't have to subscribe to. NICSL and Everbridge, you subscribe, you join, and by putting in your phone number, by your email, but wireless emergency alerts ping off cell towers. So I like to compare them to Amber Alerts. If you've got one of those, it's the same type of system. Registration is not required. We also utilize local radio stations during emergencies. These radio stations are KVYN, KVON, and some other stations. There's even KBBF, which is the bilingual public radio. And KVON has a Spanish speaking side. We do know and are aware that the public utilizes third-party apps. While we don't endorse any third-party apps, we're aware, and we encourage people to sign up for Facebook, sign up for other ways to get communication. We don't endorse that information because we have to confirm all information, but we are aware that third-party apps exist, and we suggest getting signed up or getting involved in your community with those. One of the things that we do like to provide to our citizens is the idea of a go bag. A go bag is a bag you prepare ahead of time, and you put in items like medications, cash, pet supplies, personal items like toiletries if you're going to be evacuated from your house. Printed copies of documents is also great, or just going digital is another thing, or having a memory stick with your important documents on it. Another thing I like to tell parents, especially parents of school-age children, is to go around your house and make it a fun event with your child and say what things are important to you. It's some of the feedback I heard after these fires was I didn't know what was important to my child. I didn't grab their favorite stuffed animal because it wasn't important at the time to me. But those are the things that matter later on. So even going around with children's, and saying, let's do a go bag together is very important. There's another tool that we use called the grab list. The grab list is things that you go around ahead of time that you want to grab. So we use an example, Uncle Tom's guitar. That's not something you can put in your go bag or you're going to drive around with it, but it is something that you could put on a list, and you go to every room in your house and you put it on a list and say, this is what I need to grab if I am evacuated. Next, Napa County, speaking of evacuation, Napa County doesn't pre-designate evacuation centers because it obviously depends on the event. There's evacuation centers that we partner with and we tend to use often, but because the events are so unique, we don't know ahead of time what the evacuation centers will be. But those evacuation centers will be sent out by Nixle and social media, and they will be disseminated out during an event. What we can say is those evacuation center, you can expect to find snacks and meals and charging stations and emotional support and a place to sleep, restrooms and showers. You can bring your go bag. It's very important to bring your medication list, and you can bring cell phones and contact information. What's not allowed at evacuation centers is alcohol or drugs, smoking, weapons, or violent or disruptive behavior. And finally, I'd like to talk about Zone Haven. Zone Haven is a tool that we use. It is not a notification system. Zone Haven is a separate resource that families can use. Napa received Zone Haven after the 2020 fires, which is why you haven't seen it. There hasn't been any big scale fire that we've utilized Zone Haven since. And we're still getting the messaging out about Zone Haven. I'm sure you've seen Know Your Zone, but it's not a notification system. It's a resource to find more information after you've been notified. We partner with the SO on that, the sheriff's office, but you can go to community.zonehaven.com. We recommend you putting that in your phone, and you can find your zone, but you can also find what's happening in your zone at the time, which is why it's a separate resource for families, for parents, for individuals, but it is not a notification system. And then finally, one of the things that we know is a lot of people during disasters feel like they need a support system. So we recommend getting to know your neighbor, and we've identified a need to help you get to know your neighbor. We have a loteria game that we actually have contracted with a graphic designer to design. It is on our website, Ready Napa County or the County of Napa. And you can download this loteria game. You guys can download it at the schools, even play it in the classrooms, but it has emergency preparedness information like evacuation tags, Nixle alerts, but it's a game that can be played to get people familiar and a way to create that support network for people that might be experiencing some PTSD from fires or just feel like they need extra support so they feel more prepared for fire season. Thank you.
Thank you, Brianna. Next we have Under Sheriff Colin Dodd. He's planning to talk a little bit more about Zone Haven as well. He's worked with the Napa County Sheriff's Office for 20 years and done field operations and worked with the Emergency Operations Centers as the operations chief for several fires and other critical incidents. And I'm sure we'll speak a bit to how all of this connects in with schools. So Under Sheriff Colin, take it away.
Julie, thank you, and hello, everybody. We'll try to make it brief on our end. The specifics for the Sheriff's Department really boil down to during these critical events, we do the evacuation. So we work very closely with Eric Hernandez, CAL FIRE, and that crew to let us know what areas are going to be necessary to evacuate, and then we get to it. Once an evacuation is done, then we're also tasked with the security of it. And I know that's a big question for businesses, schools, residents, homeowners. Okay, you just asked us to leave. Now who's watching the shop? And that's us. That falls on the Sheriff's Department or the law enforcement jurisdiction, wherever you may be. That's our main goal, is to get people out. So as it pertains specifically to schools, we have two ways to notify you. Well, sorry, not two ways to notify you. We have two messages that we use when we notify, especially during fires. We have a warning and we have an order. What I would suggest for schools is if that warning's coming, don't wait for the order. Get a move on. And that's what I think Eric and Brianna were both talking about, is having that evacuation plan outside of a fire drill to figure out how you're going to get the students moved. And just like Eric said, we can help with brainstorming some ideas depending on your specific location. The other things that I want to reiterate, and we feel like we try to push the stuff out enough, and then we have community engagement, and we realize, wow, there's still a lot of people that don't know what we're asking for during these events. So the first one that we want to talk about is the evacuation tag. I got to flip it around, see if we can see it somehow. Evacuation tags are available through us. If you need them, if you want to have them at your schools, if you want to have them in a certain area, all you have to do is email us and we'll get a bunch up there to you. We like pushing these out in the community. They've been very effective in the small fires that we've had since we've instituted the evacuation tags. And what it does is it gives us more time to help people that need it. If somebody can't get out, we can look at an area, a residence, see that it's been evacuated already and move past it. Again, I'm going to cover security as we talk about the evacuation tags. So people say, hey, if I put this evacuation tag up, it tells all the bad guys that I'm not here to come get my stuff. Well, in an area that has an evacuation order in it, nobody's supposed to be there. We're patrolling it. We're never going to guarantee perfection, but we've been pretty successful in the last 2 large fires that we've had. The next one, I'm going to try to do this over Zoom, is the high-low siren. If you haven't heard the high-low siren, think back to older TV shows or movies that are created over in Europe, and that siren over there. It is different from the sirens that you hear every day. I hope this plays. Can we hear that? No?
No.
Couldn't come through, huh? All right. Well, the high-low siren, it's on our Facebook. It's in all of our fire preparedness stuff. But if that siren is heard, you need to seek information. Normally, that siren means that there's something in your area and you need to get moving right away. And that's the simplest way to put it. If you hear the high-low siren, you're going to hear all the patrol cars that are in Napa County, whether it be Napa PD, San Helena PD, Calistoga PD, they all have that siren available. Last thing that we'll talk about is, again, zone haven. I know Brianna touched on it a little bit. It is important. And as we get better with it, because it is still a work in progress, as we get better with it, it's going to make information for you more available for planning purposes. These fires tend to move. These fires tend to have predictions to them. And if you're keeping an eye on how these events are proceeding in the days to come, it can help you make decisions. And that's really what we're going to be using Zone Haven for as it relates to the public. Julie, that's pretty much all we have.
Thank you so much. So we will move on to PG&E. And we have Dave Meyer here with us. He's a senior manager leading PG&E's customer engagement and strategy. And his role is focused on enhanced power line safety settings and customer communications during emergency events. And I will turn it over to you, Dave.
Thanks. I'm getting a message that the host has disabled screen sharing, but I can talk as we work through that.
Wait, sorry, Dave, I just made you a co-host. Try again. Maybe it should work this time.
Coming through?
Yes. Thanks.
All right. So briefly going to discuss our focus areas here for 2022. So these are the 3 pillars of our program, really reducing wildfire risk and preventing catastrophic wildfires. That's the rebuilding and modernizing of our grid. That's things like hardening the overhead infrastructure, undergrounding in the highest fire risk areas. The middle section there is about minimizing customer impacts. That has to do with public safety power shutoff, which Napa County is very familiar with when there's high winds and dry conditions. And the newest program we have in place, enhanced power line safety settings, that we'll talk about here today. And then lastly, we have our improvements to the situational awareness. That's our forecasting tools, our fire watch cameras. I'm sure our public safety partners on the call are familiar with those. So in 2021, we piloted what we're calling enhanced power line safety settings, or EPSS. In essence, what this does is takes smart programmable protection devices on our system and speeds them up so they can de-energize within about 1/10 of a second if they detect a problem. That could be a car hitting a pole, a tree limb on the line, any fault that occurs on the system, it's de-energized more quickly. And really what it comes down to is the more we can reduce that fault time, that means reducing the amount of energy released and reducing the likelihood of an ignition of sparks. So as we went through July this year and been tracking, we've seen a 73% reduction in CPUC reportable ignitions on those circuits that have these settings compared to that prior 3-year average. So it's working. It's an effective tool in reducing ignitions. But while it makes the system safer, these settings can also result in power outages that impact more customers, including the schools that folks on this call are representing. So this graphic will provide this deck through Julie and the team so that anyone who's interested will have it. This is really what it's about. An object hits a line or some fault occurs. The device senses it, turns off power. Our crews go out, they patrol or inspect the line, make any repairs, ensure the system is safe to re-energize, and they turn the power back on again. This can take a little longer because these are smart devices that are, there are fewer of them on each circuit. So the grid is broken up into slightly larger chunks than it would be if we didn't have EPSS in place. So the more area that the crews have to patrol to try to find the damage, that takes longer. And that's why we can see outages that affect more customers, more people, and take a little longer to restore. So looking at what we can expect, the settings are generally in place May through November. The good part about that is much of that is during the over summer season for schools, though recognizing there are summer school and year-round schools as well. Because the outages, again, are caused by an actual fault, we don't have the ability to notify anyone in advance, whether that be a public safety partner or an everyday customer, residential customer. That's a big difference from public safety power shutoffs, where we can forecast a wind event coming and have a couple days to let the community know that we expect there to be a public safety power shutoff. These are caused by an actual fault, so we don't know they're coming. But when the outages occur, we do send out outage notifications. That's automated phone calls, text message, emails, and updates through our website at pge.com/outages, where the most up-to-date information is. We'll talk about contact information a little later, opportunities there to make sure that you're getting those messages. As we wrap up, last couple things here, there are a series of actions we're taking really across the service territory to help minimize those outage times. We're changing the way our crews do patrols to help them identify those sources of outages more quickly and get them corrected so there's not a repeat. We're installing what we call fault indicators in those areas where we're having multiple outages but can't figure out where or why. They give us an indication of where a fault may occur. Our engineers can use the information to try to identify fault locations. And I'll just call out that the part of that time I mentioned is the patrolling, right? We've broken down our patrols, so we only have to patrol the area where we think the fault occurred. If we have a large scale outage, it helps us reduce the time in focusing that patrol on the area that's most likely to have that fault and getting the power back on as soon as possible. And additionally, as we have circuits that have multiple impacts or had multiple outages, we are doing focused reviews of the settings to make sure they're set appropriately, right? Are they too sensitive? Do we need to slow them down a little bit? We're looking for opportunities for vegetation management, and then ways to break the grid into smaller chunks. We call it sectionalizing, right? Making smaller and smaller chunks so that outages are as small as possible. And there are a series of other really technical things that our engineers are looking at to help minimize the occurrence of outages. And then when there is an outage, to help our crews get the power back on more quickly. I do want to jump briefly into this. I think this is helpful to show, or has been, in Napa County. This white area is the Napa County border. I'm just flashing it on and off so folks can see. I'm going to turn the roads off because they can be confusing. So we have done some modeling to understand basically on these different circuits. If we look back over 3 years, historical reliability, where might we expect more impacts from the EPSS program? So lots of colors, kind of moving from blue, which is areas we'd expect maybe an outage over that May through November period, tends to be more of the urban areas or that urban interface with the more rural areas. The green is about an outage a month is what we would see historically. Moving yellow, 1 to 2 outages a month, orange 2 to 3, and red potentially 3 to 4 outages a month. That doesn't mean that's going to happen. That's historical lookbacks and at the customer level where we might see outages if the same thing were to occur and we weren't taking any action to try to reduce the likelihood of those impacts. We've taken school sites, overlaid them, right, so that we can identify schools that are in some of those higher, potentially higher impact areas. and then working with our account management team to make sure that we're having outreach to all of the potentially impacted schools. Schools are a critical customer flagged in our outage system. So our local teams, our crews, they know where these schools are, and they're going to do whatever they can to prioritize restoring power to schools when there is an outage. I think with that, as I close, I'll mention I do have Brian Ambrosini with me. He manages our team of our customer relationship managers assigned to schools. So his team are those account managers that many of your staff has been working with to understand the program, and if they have any other billing questions, anything like that. So as we move to Q&A, Brian is here to answer questions about that interaction between PG&E and the school districts that we serve. I'll stop there.
Great. Thank you, Dave. That was really interesting information with the map. All right, so we will move on to our next panelist. We all know Dr. Karen Relucio serves as the Napa County Health Officer and directs the Public Health Division, which has 17 programs, including emergency preparedness. And Dr. Relucio currently participates in multiple local and state collaboratives to improve public health. Dr. Relucio.
Thank you, Julie. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Perfect. Thank you. So I am going to talk about wildfires and air quality, and just how we monitor that during the wildfire. So, I think that just to make it clear that public health has a more peripheral role in fire response and preparedness, but where we get asked questions is when there's a lot of smoke in the air and the impacts on health. So I'm going to first start with the air quality index, which is based out of the EPA's recommendations, and this is based on values of index for whether there's too much ozone in the air or particulate matter. So the best way to look at this is by color, because numbers are sometimes hard to remember. But if you have an air quality index that is in the green zone, or 0 to 50, then the air quality is satisfactory and air pollution poses little or no risk. Once you get to yellow, that's a moderate level of concern with values of 51 to 100. Then air quality is acceptable, but there may be a risk for some people, especially those who are particularly sensitive to air pollution. Once you get to orange, it's unhealthy for sensitive groups, and the air quality index is 101 to 150. And so members of sensitive groups may experience health effects, and the general public is less likely to be affected. Once you get to red and up, that's where the levels of concern increase. So air quality index color of red means unhealthy, and the air quality index is 151 to 200, which means some members of the general public may experience health effects, and members of sensitive groups may experience more serious health effects. Once you get to purple with very unhealthy, with 201 to 300 as an air quality index, that's a health alert. And that means the risk of health effects is increased for everyone. And then maroon as hazardous air quality with the air quality index of over 301. And that means the health warning of emergency conditions. So everyone is more likely to be affected. So just to define what sensitive groups are, people that are more likely to be affected by particle pollution exposure. So these are people with underlying heart and lung diseases, people with diabetes, older adults, and children. And the reason why children are more at risk is because they have a lot more circulation in their lung, and so they're more likely to absorb a lot more of the toxic effects of wildfire smoke. And they also, tend to be more active outside. So I think that's why they're considered a sensitive group. So, I'm just thinking about the questions that have been asked during the previous wildfires from the schools. And a lot of it does really is predicated on extracurricular activities and athletic practice. So I just want to give a shout out to Napa County Office of Education that put out this adapted matrix that looks at the air quality level by color, as well as breaking out the activities that are safe to embark on during different air quality areas, and then which is not safe to do. So in general, you know, when you get to the unhealthy or when we're talking about athletic practice or recess, it becomes, it's more of an issue when you're at red or above. So that's where, you know, you either limit vigorous exercise outside, or else take the practice or the activity indoors. And then, you know, versus, you know, I think it's just breaking it down by population. And then, so I just wanted to give a shout out because I think it's a best practice. So I think a question that I get asked a lot is, so I'm going to just do a comparison between COVID and poor air quality because the mitigation strategies are different. So for COVID-19, outside is better than inside, whereas if you have poor air quality, inside is safer than outside. And then for COVID-19, you know, in terms of ventilation with outside air is protective because you're bringing in fresh air and diluting the effects of COVID-19 viral particles in the air. However, if there's a wildfire, ventilation with outside air may be hazardous. So you want to recirculate air. And then for COVID-19, recirculated air may spread COVID, whereas for poor air quality, recirculated air decreases wildfire smoke. So what do you do? Because there's contrasting strategies. So I think in general, N95 masks are protective for both, for COVID-19 and for poor air quality. And MERV 13 air filters, if that could be put into your HVAC system, are protective as well. So it is a balance, and just trying to figure that out because we are in a different world. And then I'm gonna just end with, you know, do we dismiss school because, you know, the air quality is in the red zone? Well, that decision is not really solely based on air quality index. It depends on your HVAC system. It depends on the age and design of building structures. So if you have a school where the classroom opens out to the outside and doesn't keep unhealthy air in, that's probably a school that might need to be dismissed during a wildfire event because it's not, the structure is not keeping those that are inside safe. You know, I think the other thing is that if you have a lot of staff that are, you know, in the sensitive groups, they might be at higher risk. So there's a lot of complexities when it comes to school dismissal decisions. And sometimes, you know, not all schools can be on the same page. There are different considerations. You know, I think, you know, I think another practical matter is that sometimes you may have a school where everybody walks to school. And, you know, and I know that there is a jurisdiction where that occurs. And, you know, the act of walking to school pretty much puts the whole family at risk. So then that might be another decision outside of sheer air quality that makes people decide that they're going to dismiss schools. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Thanks for tackling the complexity of the intersection of air quality and COVID. That's certainly been an issue we've been tackling. And I noticed Sarah put in the chat some resources related to athletics and outdoor events too. That thank you for sharing that, Sarah. And again, we'll capture all of the resources shared and send them out at the end of this meeting. All right, so last but certainly not least is Josh Schultz. He's the Deputy Superintendent of the Napa County Office of Education. And Josh has been the education representative as well for the Napa County OES, and I will turn it over to Josh.
Thanks, Julie. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to take a couple of minutes to go through some state level resources that are available for emergency preparedness and talk a little bit about the role the county office can play in terms of helping to coordinate and support schools in emergency events. A lot of what I'm going to touch on is focused more on public schools because that's who we're really tasked to support and what the state is focused on. But there are, I think, opportunities for us to have more interactions and support for private schools. And certainly through the experience of COVID, we've had more opportunities to support you than I think ever before. And that's been a good experience for us and hopefully helpful for you. So I'll try to touch on some of those places as well. So let me get my slides ready here. So first of all, on the state level, there's a few things that I think would be useful for people to be aware of. And I've listed them here and I'll talk about each of them briefly. So one, that the County Superintendents Association has actually put together a manual for what they call emergency recovery. And this is not really an emergency response guide, but it's a guide directed to county offices for how we can work with school districts and possibly also with private schools on trying to do preparedness activities in advance that will make us better able to respond to emergency events, and how to go through the steps necessary for recovery and getting operations back up and running. It was first released right at the end of 2019, and I confess that I had every intention of starting to go through it with our local school districts, and then something happened in the spring of 2020 that distracted me for the last 2 years. But I'm hoping to come back to that activity with the school districts starting this fall and just kind of work through it piece by piece, and I'll show you a couple examples of that. Next listed here is the school disaster and emergency, CDE school disaster and emergency management resources. So really, since the 2017 fires, so the Tubbs and Atlas and those fires that we all remember so well, the California Department of Education has kind of spun up a much greater capacity to support schools in emergency events. And they have some dedicated staff, targeted to that task, who have been recruited primarily from Cal OES, and a variety of resources that are available. So I want people to be aware of those. And then finally, the school emergency reporting system is a new system that CDE launched just this spring, where they're asking public schools specifically to proactively go onto a web-based system to report any kind of emergency events. So just a couple examples of the types of resources that are in the Successa guide that I mentioned is things like walking school districts through how do you get a WPS Gets card, which is access for government agencies to emergency communication capacities in an event that ordinary communication links are down or too jammed to use. And, I have one of these little cards here that I keep in my wallet. I haven't actually had to use it in an emergency, but I try to remember to test it every year. But, it's something that people might not be aware of. The guide walks you through how to get that and how you might use it. Another example is putting together mutual aid agreements in advance so that you already have some, formal framework for supporting each other in the event of emergency. If I need to send, one district's transportation resources to help evacuate another district's, or other types of resources like that can share, districts, of course, do that anyway. But if you have mutual aid agreements in place, you know how to do it. You know what the rules are going to be, how reimbursement is going to work. It's also something that is necessary for FEMA reimbursement in many cases. But there's a whole bunch of other resources within that guide that are useful for people. I think even the private schools may find it useful to go through and think about some of these preparedness activities that it talks about. And it's publicly available on Successa's website, and the link is in the slides that you'll get later. So then moving on to the school emergency reporting system, as I mentioned, it's a web-based system that CDE has spun up, and every school district has an access code that allows you to access it in order to go in and just quickly report the type of emergency and a little bit of information about it. The idea is that this then lets CDE know early on that something's going on that they may need to respond to, that they may be able to help mobilize state level resources to support emergency response and recovery. I believe CDE tried to push these codes out to every district earlier this year, but I have the codes for all the districts. So if you don't know what your code is, just contact me and I'll make sure you get it. And I'll also try to push that out to districts again. So this slide here is actually from a presentation that CDE did for county superintendents not so long ago. And it's their view of what the county office role is in emergency preparedness and emergency response. And I think this is a role that you've seen us play in, for example, in COVID and other circumstances. But the idea is, that we can be a conduit for information between the state and the local districts and local private schools in appropriate situations, and that we can pull together resources, like, for example, we're doing with this meeting to help support people. So, we're happy to do all these things. We may not be the source of all the expertise and all the information, but we definitely are prepared to step in and support schools in any way we can in both emergency preparedness and emergency response. So in terms of contacts and some formal roles we have here within the county office, Julie mentioned earlier that I've been, tasked with being our school representative with the Napa County Office of Emergency Services. They've recently started up again weekly operation area briefings, so I'm attending those. So it's an opportunity both for me to hear things that might be of interest to schools in terms of emergency response and emergency preparedness. It's also an opportunity for me to represent schools and ask questions or ask for resources that we might need. So if you ever have a question for the folks at the county or for other agencies and you don't know who to reach out to in the county, feel free to contact me for that type of information. I've also been the conduit for most of the major emergency events we've had in the last 10 years in terms of CDE looking for information about school closure. Of course, they reach out to Dr. Nemko as well and other staff in our office, but oftentimes I'm the one who's tasked with pulling together information about, for example, which schools are closed. And then in terms of just general communication around agencies, we've got Shauna Wagner on the call. I know many of you know her, you know that she's been pushing out a ton of information in cooperation with County Public Health around COVID. And that's kind of Shauna's role, is to keep the information flowing. So she's another good contact for reaching out in terms of communications around these types of issues. So just some examples of other things where we may be able to help both public and private schools here. So one is, help with safety planning and development, with training, with threat assessments. We actually got a grant from Cal OES, and we have some dedicated staff working on these activities now. And Julie's kind of overseeing that work. So, if you're interested in helping us put together a training or finding a consultant to do some assessments, we're available to work on that. And then in terms of funding opportunities, I can help work with you. Others in our office can help work with you. For example, if you want to know, how do I access, mitigation grants to do activities to harden our facilities? Other types of, federal, state resources that might be available for trainings, professional development, et cetera. Many of the school districts, of course, are part of North Bay Schools Insurance Authority. They also have programs that support these types of activities. So feel free to reach out to me on those types of issues. And then finally, for specific types of fiscal support, like, for example, what we in public schools call the J13A, the reporting to the state that you had to close and still getting reimbursement for those days, even though you don't have students attending, and other related things about claiming for recovery grants from FEMA and Cal OES. Kelly Busey in our office, who I think many of you have met, but maybe not all of you, is a good contact for that type of information. This, of course, is just a short list of some of the things that we might be able to do, but we're really open to playing any role that supports the schools in the county that we have the capacity to do. So feel free to reach out for us for other types of things that you think might be helpful. And of course, we've got all our social media where we push out information sometimes about some of these activities. So you might want to think about signing up for those things as well. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Josh. So with that, we have a few minutes left for questions. So you can feel free to type a question in the chat, or if you want to just come off of mute and ask it of any of our panelists. We're here for questions. I'm not seeing any questions. I'll just say again that we are planning to package all these resources and put them together for you and send them on out. So you'll have them all if you weren't able to capture everything as it went by on the chat. And you'll be receiving that from Shauna, who I want to thank for helping put together today's event. And I want to thank all of our panelists as well for taking their time today. And I'll give it any last calls for questions. We have a few more minutes. If anybody has anything they'd like to ask of our group.
not a question, but this is Shauna. I'll just jump in with a thought on Zone Haven. You know, my recommendation would be to look up not only your home, but all your school sites that you're responsible for, so that I did that I have like in my notes page in my phone, I have where my home is in Zone Haven, and then our different sites, so that when those Zone Haven things come up, I'll be able to look quickly and see which category we fall into or which zone. And also, just to reiterate a lot of the things that were talked about today, and in particular, I think that Brianna shared, they're like Go Bags and the Loteria game and things like that. They're on readynapacounty.org, and you can download those and then send them out in your parent newsletter, put them on your school social media. Teachers can use them in class. So just want to emphasize that a lot of these resources we talked about you can be the conduit to getting that information to your families.
Wonderful. Great. Well, with that, we thank you for your time, and look for an email from us. And thank you to our panelists once again. Have a wonderful afternoon, everybody.
Thank you.